an idea or so from you about how to get Jerry Seinfeld on this thing, which I know is ridiculous and never happening. But if I pick someone attainable, then this podcast would have ended after a few episodes. So
I don't think it's as unattainable as you think, but yeah, man, I'm a comedian. I'm from New York, man, a comedian from New York City. I started comedy here in 2000, and the first time I did it was 2011. Then I went back to college and I didn't do stand-up that whole year. And when I finished school, I moved back to the city and I started doing it, going to the open mics. So I say I started in 2012, May, I believe 14th, 2012. So I'm coming up on a 9-year anniversary of when I started doing stand-up. But yeah, been doing it 9 years. The pandemic slowed things down a little bit, but I would say I took maybe like 3 months off when the pandemic hit. I probably took March, April, May off. But then in June, we started doing outdoor shows here in New York City. And I was doing Zoom shows, and I was going on the road to places that were open and doing socially distanced mass shows. So it's been 9 years. I've been doing it.
Wow. What did you do in that few months when you weren't actually doing any stand-up? Was it creating stuff online, podcasts, or you just feed up and said stuff it?
I stopped, man, because from the moment I started comedy, I kind of just was doing comedy like every night. Like I realized during the pandemic, it was the first time I went longer than like 5 days without doing stand-up in like 5 days in a row, because I was just on it every night. So when the pandemic hit, I was like, I'm just gonna hang out. Like everybody's life got turned upside down. So I was like, I'm gonna just chill out. I would do like little stuff. Like I would do meetings here and there, like little Zoom meetings to stay in people's mind and stuff. And I wasn't doing anything for stand-up regard. I was working on a script. I was working on a thing. So I finished the script that I wanted to write. And that was basically it. I took the time off and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, you may as well have enjoyed it. Get some kind of positive out of a negative. You hear a lot of comedians talking about the pandemic and say how they weren't on for months, and they kind of lost their onstage persona and felt like almost they forgot how to do it. How much do you think when you actually go on stage, is it your personality, or is it an extension of your personality, putting on that showmanship? Or what are the comedians talking about when they kind of lost that stage presence?
Yeah, for me, it's an extension of my personality. I wouldn't call it a persona. I would just say it's me, like on steroids. It's just an exaggerated version. No, yeah, so it's just an exaggeration of me. But I definitely did have that thing where you think you forget how to do it. Like I remember those first few shows, because not only do you think you forget how to do it, but you also forget your material. So I remember the first time I started going back out, I didn't remember my material. I had to really like listen and watch old stuff so I knew what jokes to tell. And it took a while to come back to me. Like right now, I feel like I'm operating at a point where I'm in good shape right now, because New York, the comedy clubs have been open for a month. They opened up April 2nd, and I've done maybe 50 spots since then. So I feel like I'm in good shape right now. But then it's like returning to the gym. You're like, what was the exercises I used to do? Like, I don't remember, So I totally could relate to like comedians feeling like they lost their stage thing. But it's like riding a bike. It'll come back. It comes back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like you want a PT to come in and just remind you on how it all happens, like you do in the gym.
Right. But it's just getting up on stage and figuring it out. And I remember the early on after when we started opening up a little bit, like the crowds understood, because the crowds were like, it was the kind of thing where the crowds were like, oh yeah, we understand, because our job became something else too. So we understand that your job also, if it would have been something that was like specific, like let's say there was like, hypothetically speaking, like a comedian strike where only comedians stopped working and then the rest of the world continued, I feel like the crowds wouldn't have been so like understanding, because they would have been like, what? Like, we've been working. Why haven't you been working? But because it was a thing that literally affected everyone on the planet, I feel like the crowds were like, oh yeah, of course you don't remember your act, because I had to go from an office to Zoom. So my thing got messed up too, and they were better understanding.
Yeah, that makes sense. People can relate. Also, when you're writing a joke, something that everybody kind of gets and can relate to, and understands the punchline and the premise of that joke makes it often a better joke. But because almost everyone's doing Corona stuff now because it's so universal and everyone gets it, at what point do you think, like, I'm going to avoid Corona because everyone's talking about that, but it's got all the elements of a good joke because everyone can relate?
Right now, I feel like I'm at that point right now. Like, I'm not writing any new joke about Corona. Like, stuff that I had or stuff I already had, I'll do it. But I wrote that, previous, but like, I'm not doing anything. Like, I'm not sitting down writing anything new about Corona. Like, I wrote some stuff about it before, but now I'm like, let's just get on with it.
Remembering, you were talking about trying to remember your material. And I've always wondered how, and this is the most common question I probably get from friends, how do comedians remember half an hour, a 1 hour set, and so effortlessly? At least if you're an actor, they're remembering their lines in little chunks and it'll go to different scenes, but you've got to remember a whole heap in one go. Do you stay at home and rehearse the lines literally like you imagine an actor would, or does it come to you and just flows? How does it work for you?
Well, I'll write the jokes out and I'll get like a pretty understanding of where the joke, the setup and where I'm taking the joke and what the payoff is. But it honestly just comes from you telling it on stage. Believe it or not, like when you say something that gets a huge laugh, 9 out of 10 times your brain just remembers it. It's like you get a euphoric feeling from that laughter that your brain just registers it. And you might, you record the set just in case you miss like a tag here or a word there, but you usually remember the overall joke, if it gets a decent response. So that's what I do. Like, I'll write it. I'll write the stuff like at home. I'll sit here, I'll write, and then I'll try to memorize it as much as I could. I don't try to be robotic with it. I don't want to memorize it like line for line, like I'm an actor, but I'll remember what the joke is about and the setup, and I'll have the bullet points, and then I'll take it on stage. And you do it one joke at a time. I know it sounds daunting to think like, how do you remember an entire hour? But you don't sit down and remember an entire hour. You first remember one joke, then you go to 5 minutes, then you go to 15 minutes, then you go to 20, 30. And before you know it, after a couple months, you could memorize the whole hour.
Would you say that every time you go up, you forget at least 1 or 2 lines from what you had planned in your head?
Not every time. No. A lot of times, not every time. Sometimes I remember, not every time. But I also have like actually I have my joke book right here. I also have like
Geez, have you been writing jokes in that thing since the 18th century? What's going on? Looks
like I thought it was cool.
Looks like Robin Hood's diary.
Yeah, I thought it was cool. I have like a bunch of few joke books, but I thought this was like cute. It's a leather notebook. It's like a leather bound. Yeah. It looks like kind of like a Bible. And I thought it was like a cool thing. Like, these are my jokes. And it's a little dorky.
That's
too.
Cool.
But I have these index cards. For example, like these are older cards. I mean, these are old. See, it says new jokes on them. And then I'll have just the name of the joke. Just so when I go on stage, I'll look at it just to remember the name of the joke, just so I could remember like some of these jokes. And this was like right when the pandemic started. So here I got like some new jokes that I wrote. And I also have some of the old stuff that I was doing before the shutdown. This is like when I was first getting out on the thing. So I'll just have like the name of it. For example, like I'll just read some of them. It'll be like, it says new jokes. It says Black Band-Aid. That was a joke. That was just a joke I had wrote. It was during like, there was like like the George Floyd protest.
Yeah.
That were going on around this time last year.
Yeah.
And right around that time, like Johnson & Johnson announced that they were gonna release black Band-Aids to match the skin tone of black people. So I had this little joke. It was like a throwaway joke where I was like, people were mad at us for protesting, but I'm like, how else are we gonna get black Band-Aids? It's kind of making it seem like it was all just for the black Band-Aids, because it's such a what? Johnson? This has nothing to do with what we're protesting for. You think you're fixing racism because you're making black Band-Aids? So that was like something. I have a joke. Sugar daddies. I was talking about turning 30 and aspiring to be a sugar daddy, stuff like that. So yeah, I'll just write the name of the joke. And see, these jokes, I'm not even doing it, but just from looking at the name, I recall what the bit
Yeah.
was, you know. So I like Black Bandit. I haven't done that joke in a year, but I see the name and I'm like, oh, I know what that bit was about.
And you putting that up on the stage with you, just underneath your beer, next to your beer. So you go take a sip of beer or something or a drink, and there it is. You have a
Yeah,
quick
I'll
glance
put
at
it
it.
usually on the stool. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll put it on the stool usually. Sometimes I'll just have it in my hand. Like it depends on the show. Like I'm not, you know, if it's like a sold out show Saturday night, you know, in a comedy club or, you know, some theater, I'm not going to do that because you want to give them a show. But if it's like a, you know, just a normal off night show, like especially back, we're doing a lot of outdoor shows because we weren't open. And we still are now. So like on our outdoor shows, like, listen, we're in a backyard. So I have my notes. These are new jokes that I'm going to try out on you guys.
Yeah, and you don't think there's anything wrong with, you know, comedians checking their notes, even on maybe not on the biggest stage, so they get being recorded, or you're playing at the Comedy Cellar on a sold out show. You wouldn't do it then, but only when you're kind of trying things out.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it at the Comedy Cellar. I just don't think that I'm there career wise where I would be allowed to do it.
Yeah.
Like it's a big risk where if it doesn't go well, I feel like I could get in trouble.
Yeah.
So if I were gonna do it, it'd be like these jokes better hit, you know, 100%. But at other clubs where the pressure is not as high as the Comedy Cellar, yeah, I think it's okay. I don't think the audience cares. I don't think anyone cares. I think people only care if the stuff sucks. It's only unprofessional if what you're reading is terrible. But if you're reading like good jokes, they don't care.
Yeah,
They just
absolutely.
want to laugh.
Yeah, absolutely. And how long are you giving a joke, like your Black Band-Aid or anything that how long are you giving it before you think, nah, that's not working, I'm not going to include it in my solid half hour?
Sometimes I'll try to run it for like a week, but sometimes like this is where like a lot of my jokes, sometimes they reach a point where they're getting laughs, but they're not getting big laughs, or they're not getting the huge laugh to close it out. So those type of jokes, I'll keep them for a while, and I'll just be like, it's something missing, and I'll just try to figure it out. Sometimes I don't find it. I got to put them on the shelf, and I'll come back to it a couple months later. I'm like, oh yeah, that bit about Black Band-Aid, that wasn't bad. Let's try that again. And you look at it with like fresh eyes. So it depends. If it's not getting any laughs at all, no longer than a week.
Yeah. Okay.
Couple nights.
But that's with you going out multiple times every night. So you probably say it 10 times, no laugh, and then you throw it in the bin.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe not even 10, maybe like 5 times. No laughs. 5 is like a lot. If it gets 0 laughs, 5 is a lot.
Yeah. Okay. And how often are you writing, and what's your process look like? You're literally sitting down with your notepad and writing away, you're typing away on your laptop, and how often are you doing it?
Yeah, I'm trying to write. I try not to, I've done the like schedule thing where it's like, I'm going to write from 3 to 4 p.m. every day. And I don't really like that. I feel like that's not conducive. So I'll just kind of be around my apartment doing stuff. I'm answering emails, but I always have my notebook around me, and I have my computer where I keep a lot of my writing stuff too. So like, I'll just be bouncing around, like doing laundry, and then I'll just get an idea and I'm like, let me write this down. And I'll just go over to the computer, and sometimes the idea is flowing. I'm like, oh, this is like taking shape of a bit. And sometimes it's just an idea, and you're like, I'll work on that later. And then eventually I'll sit down. And when I think I have when I have the skeleton of a joke, I don't have the whole body, but I have the skeleton of it. That's when I'll be like, let me try this on stage, and I'll try it like treading lightly, like, you know, I'll throw it in the middle of like some stuff that I know does better. And see where it lands. And if the skeleton starts getting laughs, that's when I'm like, all right, I gotta sit down with this and really figure that out, because there's something here.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the process.
Yeah, you talk about it coming to you doing the laundry or whatever. What about if you're just out in public? You hear about a lot of comedians saying, I've got my notebook in my back pocket, which I always found a bit strange. You've got the wallet, the keys, you know, you've got everything, your phone in your pocket. Do you walk around with a notepad, or do you just jot down an idea in your phone?
I'll write it down in my phone.
Yeah.
I don't understand the notepad, because like, I'm not going to stand it, you know, start writing like I'm a 1940s newspaper editor. I'm going to write it in my phone. And then when I'm not around people, I'll try to figure that out, you know?
Yeah.
But I keep like a notebook. Like I have like a index card notebook in my car too, where I could sit down and write if I wanted to.
So you do have it. You've got it in some way, I guess, in the car, ready to go.
Yeah, but I don't remember ever stopping what was going on in the evening to sit down and write.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. Thanks for the dinner. I've just got to go to the bathroom for a second and jot down a few things.
Yeah, no, I don't remember ever doing that.
Tell me what it was like getting past at the Cellar? Because you even, you mentioned before how even you, who's done all these great things and been on the Tonight Show, you'd still be like, I've got to be extra careful when I'm going up at the Cellar.
Yeah, I mean, it was cool. I loved it. It was a dream of mine. I remember being an open mic comic, walking by the Cellar to go do an open mic around the block and thinking one day I'm going to be at this club. One day I want to perform for this club. You see these lines out the door of these young, attractive people waiting to go see a show. Sometimes celebrities, they are at the show, like watching, like not obviously you get the Chappelle's, Chris Rocks that come by, but you get also celebrities like in the audience watching comedy. And I was always like, oh, I want to perform there. Some people get that opportunity really early, which I think could be a detriment to their career because they're not necessarily prepared or ready for it. But when I got into the Cellar, I had already done the Tonight Show. I had already been on Comedy Central a couple times. So I had the confidence to be like, all right, I think I could do this. I think I belong here. I think I could tell jokes here. So for me, it was more, I mean, I wouldn't say I was like super nervous. I had like, you're anxious to like get on stage and perform and you want to do good and you want them to like you. But I had a confidence in me where I was like, but I think I belong here. I think I've done enough. I've put in the time. It was 7.5 years at that point of me doing stand-up almost every night where I was like, I put in the work. I've done the terrible shows for years and so I felt confident about that.
Yeah, it's funny that shows how hard it is though to get there, that you're on the Tonight Show before you were actually on at the Cellar.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely, I did the Tonight Show November 2019 and I got into the Cellar January. So a couple months after.
Yeah. And do you think that helped at all? Exposure wise?
Oh yeah, for sure. It helps. It helps. And I when I was getting ready for the Tonight Show, they got me they get you like a couple practice spots where you go and you run the jokes for the Tonight Show at the club. And I got a couple of them at the Cellar and it went well. So that's when I was like, all right. That's why when I auditioned, I was like, I've done this before and it went well. So I think I'm okay here.
Yeah. And you were talking about just looking up to it and seeing all these celebrities while you were walking past the Cellar. Have you seen some celebrities in the crowd now while you're performing at the Cellar and going, oh, wow, I better nail it today?
Well, no, not right now, because like I said, I got in January and then I was there for 3 months and then we shut down. So I haven't had that opportunity, but I assume as things start opening back up, things are going to be, we're only at 33% capacity right now. So I think as things start opening up, things will be better.
Yeah. And are you traveling around the country on most weekends, or are you sticking in New York? In ideal situation, not during COVID times, of course, even though it's opening back up now.
Yeah, I mean, I try to do the road. I don't necessarily plan to go on the road every weekend because I like to spend some weekends in New York because like Saturday night, the city, man, you work all week to reach that Saturday night where everyone is out, people want to see comedy. You get some good shows and you're able to get like, you can do 5 spots on a Saturday as opposed to if I went on the road, I'll do 2 45 minutes to an hour spots. So it's like I do more time on stage, but I don't get to tell the jokes as much as I would tell them here. Because in New York, you would do 5, let's say 10, 15-minute spots, but you get to tell those jokes 5 times if you're working on something. So I'll do like 2 weekends a month usually. That's what I like to do.
Okay. And can you tell me, you mentioned your experience going on the Tonight Show. I imagine that was probably a dream come true at the time. What was it like?
Yeah, it was crazy. I try to remain grounded through it. Like I tried not to let the lights blind me or get too into my head. But looking back in hindsight, it was crazy. I remember I found out that I was going to be on it about 15 days before it. And when I got that phone call, I just started running that set every night in New York City. I was doing it 3 times a night. By the time we got to the week of, I know I taped on a Thursday. By the time we got to like that Monday, I was so drained and I was just like, I was not in a good mental place. I was just so tired of telling the same jokes constantly. And when you're preparing for something like that, you go through like this kind of rigmarole where like the jokes start working and then you get so tired of them that they stop working because you no longer have that enthusiasm for them. So you start to believe that the jokes aren't that funny and you're not selling them the way you were. So the jokes stop working. And I remember like that Tuesday, I believe, just being like, man, I'm going to go on TV and bomb. I'm going to have a terrible set. Everyone's going to know that I'm a fraud and that I'm terrible and my career will be over. But then Wednesday, I remember the producer from the Tonight Show, the booker, he goes out with you and he takes you to like quality places to do the show, like the Comedy Cellar and stuff like that. So I went out with him 5 times and he was just like, oh, you're going to do great. Like you have it. It's right. It's going to be great. So that kind of gave me the relief. And then when the day came, I was cool, man. I woke up. I went to the gym. I worked out. You know, they send a car to come pick you up. Car came pick me up. I took my mom and dad, my sister, and we all went out there. It was a great experience. I can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, sitting back in that green room and reeling. Is that the kind of when you first felt like I've started to make it here in this comedy business?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes by so fast because you're in the middle of it. You're trying to like remember your jokes. You're trying to make sure like, hey, don't have a flub, don't flub on it, And then you have like Alex Rodriguez was in the dressing room next to me, the baseball player, and Celine Dion was in another dressing room. So it's kind of like a lot going on. So it's tough to sit back and be like, I've made it. But you look back at it in hindsight and you'd be like, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's right to say that they don't necessarily approve the jokes, but they do have to kind of, in a way, give it the tick of approval, the material that you're going to use on the set.
They 100% have to approve the jokes.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. They have to approve every line.
Yeah. Do you find that a bit annoying as an artist?
Well, I was just so obsessed with the Tonight Show that I had seen every set that they've allowed on the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. So I pretty much knew what they would allow and what they wouldn't. So I crafted my set that way. So I when I submitted, I didn't get one note. They were like, you can do it exactly like this.
Well, that would have been confidence boosting.
Yeah, I was excited, but I mean, it's not really confidence boosting because it's like the lawyers say, it's not like Jimmy sees it and he's like, this is hilarious, do it like this. It's lawyers that are like, oh yeah, we won't get sued for this. So yeah, you could say that.
Yeah. It kind of takes a bit of the magic, I guess, but still amazing.
Yeah. But a lot of comedians. I was happy that I didn't have to change anything.
Yeah, of course. Now, I guess a lot of comedians say that those late night sets are almost no longer the benchmark, but it's something like going on the Joe Rogan podcast or comedians in cars getting coffee. Is that something you'd say you agree with?
Yeah, I agree. It's not making your career anymore. It's not, bad. If I would have had the set that I had on the Tonight Show in 2019, if I would have had that set in 1991, my career would have went completely different. If I would have had a set, with, I forget how many applause breaks and the Roots laughing and then Jimmy, or let's say, whoever was hosting at the time, whether it was Jay Leno or whatever, invites you over to the couch. I feel like my career would have went a different path. Back then, there 60 million people were watching the Tonight Show. Now it's very different. But for me, it was still something I wanted to do, and I still think it's super cool, and I still think it has helped my career. So I'm good with it.
Yeah, awesome. What would you say is the most surreal experience you've had so far in your comedy career, where you've thought, okay, this is cool, whether it's even something small like backstage at the Cellar or anything?
Well, I got to go to a after party, a very intimate after party that Chappelle threw, where I was like, it was only like maybe 30 people, and I was one of them, and Dave Chappelle was one of them, and Chris Rock was one of them, and Jim Carrey was one of them, and I was like, this is insane. I was like, I don't know how I ended up here.
Jerry Seinfeld wasn't there, was he?
No, Seinfeld was not there.
All right, we'll get to him in just a second. I want to ask about, you mentioned that you've been doing comedy coming up to 9 years now. A lot of people that kind of just casually enjoy comedy, they kind of have this thought process that either you're funny or you're not, but it doesn't really work like that. It takes so long to craft at it and get good. Why do you think the art of comedy, I know you've described it in the past as an art form, why does it take so long to go from, hey, I'm just a funny person at the start, but to become good at this particular art form? Why does that take so long?
It takes so long for many reasons. One, I think you need to find your voice, they say, which is like what makes you funny. You need to find out what it is, like why people laugh at the stuff you say, how you say it, the persona. That takes time to develop. Like being yourself is not as easy as people think it is. That takes time to develop. But then also funny, like being good at it, there's a lot of people that do it. And to the general public, because they don't consume that much stand-up comedy, they don't really understand when a comedian is original or when a comedian is hacky. And again, I don't mean everyone. I just mean your general person. Like, they don't watch enough comedy to understand, like, oh, that joke that this comedian's doing that everyone's laughing at is an old joke that's been done by Richard Pryor. It was done by this guy. It was done by this guy. It's just an old recycled joke that he's redoing and giving it to people who don't watch comedy, so they think it's like original and new. So like that's part of it too. Like you need to immerse yourself in comedy so you could really find out like what is original. And even then, like I'm immersed in comedy, but even I have stuff where I have to ask. I'm like, is this like I have to ask other comedians, like, what do you think of this? Like, is this been done? Is this like a weird? Is this angle new? Or
there needs to be like a comedy database, like a Google comedy database of jokes would be helpful.
Right. I think that takes time to figure out. So it's just like, and it's just like anything. I know people think comedy is like you're funny, but it's not. It's like if you pick up a guitar today and you're good at the guitar today and you play the guitar every day, in 10 years, you're going to be a lot better. Yeah. That's just what it is.
Yeah, certainly makes sense to me. Last question before we get to Jerry. I just want to ask, at the moment, for you, your presence on social media, I mean, how do you view the need to, have some stuff going on your Instagram page and any kind of Facebook social you have? How important is building an audience on that as opposed to just the rawness of how good your set is?
I think it's very important, but I don't allow it to consume myself and what I do. Like I still try to maintain, I'm not going to be like, I see the guys who are great on social media and that's great for them, but I still take solace in trying to be a normal person. So if you go on my social media, like I have a lot of stand-up of my clips that have been cut and put up there, and I'll post a lot of stand-up photos, but I still try to like maintain, like social media, man, is a hell of a drug. And if you allow it to, you can get swept up in it. So I try not to allow it to get there. So I'm like, I want like the followers and I want people to come out to shows and see it, but I try not to give people enough, like my social media is very it's kind of very superficial where you won't, by going to it, I don't want you to think you know me because you see my social media, if that makes sense. I don't want you to think you know me personally.
Yeah, you want the comedian Ian and Ian the person to be distinguishable, and you don't care if the public sees the real Ian in a way.
In a way, but also I don't let it get too personal. Like I don't post like my family and stuff in there, and I don't even have that much followers. I have like I think 27,000. That's not even that much when you think about like what other people have. But still, like I don't post like photos of like my family and stuff because I don't want to. I feel like they didn't sign up to be like, because you'll post a picture of your mom and then you'll have 1,000 people that are like, "This your mom? Like, what's her phone? What's her phone number? I want to be." And it's like I don't want to allow them into that realm of thing. But I just try to be like, honestly, I'm just a positive dude that like tries to stay positive, deals with all the type of stuff that everyone else deals with. So the negativity is easy to allow it to affect you. So I try not to let it.
Let's talk about the purpose of this podcast, trying to get Jerry Seinfeld on this thing. It's going to take a long time. It'll probably never happen. I'm kidding myself. I get that. I want to ask you first. I mean, you're in New York. You're in the scene. Have you ever met Jerry Seinfeld? I feel like there's something there.
Yeah, I've seen him. I've seen him at Gotham. I've seen him at Gotham Comedy Club. I've seen him come by. Yeah.
Ever had a chat?
No, I never had a chat with him. No, he's Jerry Seinfeld. I'm not gonna go up and I'm not one of those guys gonna go up and talk to you. Like if you speak to me, we'll have a conversation. But he's busy. He's Jerry.
Yeah, he's Jerry. So I've spoken to a few comedians on this that have, they've either been bumped from him at the Cellar or something's happened. They're like, oh no, he's royalty. I'm not going to say hello at any stage unless he talks to me. Yeah,
right. Same. He also doesn't look like the most approachable dude, like someone like Chappelle. Like Chappelle is so approachable. Like the way he operates is like, it's fascinating because he's the most famous comedian in the world, and you could run up to him in the street and ask him for a cigarette and he'll give you a cigarette and smoke a cigarette with you and talk to you like you're a regular person, and like he's a regular person. So Chappelle is like somebody who's like super approachable, but I don't get that same vibe from Jerry.
I wonder what it is. I wonder if it was just so famous in the 90s or that he's a bit older or that he just literally, I guess, from seeing his show and his stand up, that he literally just, you kind of know through watching all his material over the years that he just doesn't want to talk to you or anyone.
Yeah, I mean, it's a mixture. It's a mixture of all those things. You know, it's a mixture of being 60 something years old, being in the business for 40 years, seeing every comedian, watching people. You know, your watching your career go from nothing to something, from nothing to constant
Mm.
roller coaster thing. So I get it. I get it. Like I understand it completely, and I know my place. So I wouldn't even think to like. I would, if I saw him, I would be like, hey, Jerry, what's up? Like, I would say hi, but I'm not gonna like ask him for notes on my set.
All right. So if he was personally walking past you, you're backstage at the Cellar or something or Gotham, you'd be like, and you've got no choice but to say hello, you'll say hello, but it's almost you prefer him to do it first.
Yeah, I wouldn't go up to him. Like if we're in a close enough setting where it's weird if I don't say hi, then I'll say hi. But I wouldn't be like, hey, Mr. Seinfeld. Like I would just be like, I just think I stay pretty cool, man. Like I had Jim Carrey sitting right next to me, and I didn't say a word to him. And I love Seinfeld, but to me, growing up as a kid, Jim Carrey. I mean, if you go from like Dumb and Dumber to Ace Ventura, he's the biggest movie star, especially comedic movie star there was.
Yeah.
And he was right next to me, and I was like, Jim Carrey, it's crazy, but I was cool.
Yeah. You wanted to throw out one of his punchlines from one of his movies. You're like, no, keep it to yourself.
I was using every bit of willpower to stop myself from saying, somebody stop me.
Well, you stopped yourself, so that was good.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So one thing you certainly wouldn't do is start a podcast. Desperately trying to get Jerry Seinfeld's attention. We'll say that's on the other end of the spectrum to anything you would ever do. So just pretend that I'm not doing that for the moment.
See, but I think what you're doing is cool because I think it can work because you're in Australia, right?
Yep.
And you're so far disconnected that it can become a thing, right? I feel like I'm so close to Seinfeld. I started that podcast tomorrow, and another comedian who I'll see at the Cellar would be like, have you heard of this loser dude in Queens that's trying to get you at the podcast? And then he'd have to get a restraining order on me.
Yeah. Well, that's been a concern. I'm like, is this too stalkerish? And then people are laughing, saying it's not too stalkerish because you're a blimp on the radar. He won't even know you exist. Forget it. You're on the other side of the world, so don't worry about it. You're never getting his attention. Yeah. It kind of is something, but you're right. If you were to do it,
I believe in it. I think you could get to him.
Yeah, he'll if he does come on, it'll be based on him kind of just doing it to have a laugh in his own head at me. He's just doing it for the laugh, saying, "Look at this idiot! I'll scare him by actually agreeing to come on."
Right. Yeah. But I think you could get him on.
All right, well, I appreciate that. So I've had a few ideas, both from myself and comedians that have come on the show that have put some ideas out there, all pretty ridiculous. Do you want to hear some of the ideas that we've come up with, or do you want me to ask you yours first? All right.
Sure, let me hear.
So the first, one of the main ideas we have, which is now going ahead, got the tick of approval yesterday, is literally just a billboard in Sydney. Jerry's never going to see it, obviously, but we also need people listening to this thing. And he's not going to come on a podcast with 12 people, 8 of them my relatives, coming on a podcast, right? So we've got a billboard now in Newtown. Looks like it's got the tick of approval in Sydney, which is a real busy place. And it's like the Brooklyn, okay, I'd say equivalent of New York, right next to the train station. And it just says, "Do you know Jerry Seinfeld?" with a question mark. And, the at Jerry Seinfeld and a QR code linking to the podcast. What do you think?
That's not a bad idea. That's not bad.
Because we need people to know this thing exists. But, if we have a billboard out the front of Jerry's house over there, it's going to look a bit stalkerish, right? We need to pull back a little bit. Another comedian said that I should possibly have a billboard, but put it in random countries, especially where they're cheaper, like some billboards in South America, a random billboard somewhere in Africa, just make this thing a bit global.
Yeah, that's not bad. A little expensive, but not bad.
Yeah, well, yeah. So this billboard wasn't that cheap, but it was way cheaper than people thought it was going to be. I've had comedians come on and say, I'm doing that for my next comedy show, to promote myself. I was quite shocked at how cheap a billboard was in this certain spot. I I can't remember if it was Jason Chatfield. Do you know Jason Chatfield?
Yeah, good friend of
Yeah.
mine.
Who I'm not sure if it was him that said I should be putting them around the world, but we'll see if I do that. We came up with the idea of putting, do you know Jerry Seinfeld? And I guess essentially we're just tricking people to scan the QR code and hopefully it sends them to the podcast and they hit subscribe. But
that's a good promotion, man. Good promo.
We've got the billboard. We've got a market idea. So, those people setting up stalls. I don't know if you have them over in New York, where it's you just have a fair little market, and often you get some loony setting up a thing trying to convince you why this weird religion's real, why this is real,
right.
that kind of stuff.
Right.
But it's me sitting down convincing people to why they should subscribe to this podcast.
Right.
So, and we've also got a coffee beans idea. We know Jerry loves coffee. So our own little brew of coffee, either the Get Jerry On brew or the Jerry Seinfeld brew. Then another comedian we spoke to, Tony Casillo, said it's a bit weird if you're going to send food to Jerry Seinfeld's manager or whatever, coffee, something he's not going to want to get involved in. No. So it gets a bit too creepy.
Yeah, no, he won't get involved in.
No, doesn't get involved. Just accept this as a gift and be like, thank you. Thank you.
He won't. He'll have you arrested.
All right. Okay. So
for tracking down his manager.
That's a fine line we're walking in. That's a fine line that we're walking here.
His manager's also Shapiro. Like his manager is as famous as he is. Like his manager is like really hard to track. Like it would be difficult to track him down.
That's true. Although we did interview, he did do an ad for really small Australian kind of business in a small town in Australia, not one of the bigger ones. And somehow this guy convinced Seinfeld and Shapiro to actually go on and advertise for their bank. This was only like eight years ago. And he just called Shapiro's number. He found it on the internet and left a voicemail, and he actually called him back. And 6 months later, he's starring in this ad for a small business in Australia. So that gave me some hope. And his reasoning was, no one's ever asked me to do anything from Australia, so I just did it.
Yeah. Oh, man. You missed the boat on that one.
Well, that's true, because now I'm fucked up, because now...
Yeah. He's like, nope, been there, done that.
Someone's asked. So tell me your idea. Do you have an idea? We've had some weird ones as well, starting true crime podcasts.
All right. I didn't try to get like a funny idea. I tried to think of a real idea so you can really get him on.
All right. Well, that's good because, I need all the help I can get at this stage.
Now, have you had comedian Mark Norman on?
No, I haven't had Mark Norman on, but I'll tell you what, I've talked about Mark Norman on this podcast. I know that Jerry Seinfeld gave him a shout out at the baseball, was it? At the Mets, you're wearing the Mets hat. He gave him a shout out at the Mets game. And if I'm going to be honest with you, I did a silly video on, so this podcast has a Instagram page. I did a silly video. I know he does those chin up kind of jokes or something on Instagram where he's telling jokes, doing chin ups on the street. So I tried to do that. I was doing chin ups on the street, asking him to come on because we've got to do a few weird things to convince people to come on this show. And he liked it. He's like, yeah, that's great. But then did the old, I guess, essentially the fuck off with, I'll like it, but I'm not going to comment on your request of coming on your podcast. So then I hit up his manager and they're like, oh yeah, how many people are listening to your podcast? And I kind of exaggerated a little bit, as you do, and they didn't respond. So it's not going well, Ian.
Okay, here's what I'll do for you. Mark Norman is a very close friend of mine. Yeah. I will text Mark Norman to do your podcast. That's all I can do.
Now that I will appreciate. Because
then it's up to you. I saw Mark Norman last night. I was with him last night. Yeah. I will tell him to do your podcast. Then whether he can call Jerry Seinfeld and tell him to do the podcast.
Yes, I know that.
He's that close to him.
Yeah.
He can literally send a text message with a link to your podcast, like, hey, have you heard this? Yeah. I don't know if he'll do it.
Of course.
All I can do is make that connection.
You can only be the messenger. And I have heard Mark talk about how he's awkward with his texts with Jerry Seinfeld as well.
Yes. I can tell him to do the podcast.
Well, I would appreciate that. We've had some weird and wacky ideas from comedians coming on this thing, and yours is great. It's like, how about I text Mark Norman for you, who might text Jerry Seinfeld?
Right. It's like, I'm going to end your podcast right here. This isn't going to go on long enough. I'm like, this needs to end. I'll text Mark Norman and tell him to tell Seinfeld to come on, and that's it. You'll get
No.
a yes or no, and you don't have to keep doing this. You don't got to keep taking out billboards.
You'll save me a lot of time and effort, and I'd tell you, a lot of people are saying to me, what happens if Jerry does come on? Your podcast is over, that's it. I say, well, do you think I'm going to be concerned if I get to have a chat with Jerry Seinfeld if this shitty podcast wraps up? Don't be ridiculous. Anyway, it's just going to be called Get Larry on at that stage anyway.
Yeah.
But I would very much appreciate if you did send that text message. Maybe send through a screenshot, not to make sure you did it, but just so I can put it on the Instagram of this thing.
Yeah.
Be like, look, we tried.
I'm trying to think, would it be better? Maybe I'm trying to think, would it be better if I told him face to face or with a text message?
Oh yeah, you tell me, man. You know Mark Norman. I don't know him. I don't know what his personality's like. I like it. It's like
I'm gonna tell him. Mark Norman is great. He's great, and he'll do it if you message him. I'm gonna tell him face to face and see how he plays it, and then I'll send him a follow-up text.
Wow, you're too nice to me, and this is for the amount of comedians to say no to even coming on this podcast. I think you're a godsend to this thing.
Right, I'm gonna say you have like a million listeners in Australia.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your efforts today. I just want to ask a final question. I asked this at the end to all the guests. If Jerry Seinfeld does come on this podcast, A, do you think he will, and B, when do you think it will be?
I think if I can't give you a yes or no answer, if you ask me a percentage wise, what are the chances?
Yeah.
What are the chances that Jerry Seinfeld does this podcast? I would say it's 50-50.
Well,
which is high.
I'll take that. A lot of people have said, I don't want to shit on your parade over there, but I'm going to give it about a 3%.
It's 50-50. People think, I think people aren't aware of how connected we are, especially in an industry like comedy. If you were doing this and you were like, and you wanted like Taylor Swift to come on, I would be like 0%. But comedy, we deal in we live in such a realm of like awkward absurdities that this is absurd enough where I think like, hey, maybe he'll do it.
Think he's coming on then? What? Give it a date.
I would say the chances of Seinfeld coming on within the next 18 months is 50-50.
Okay, I'll accept that. That's one of the nicer.
If in 18 months he doesn't come on and the podcast doesn't explode, get a new person to have on.
If it all goes terribly and I'm embarrassed at the end and I haven't even got close, I'm going to say the whole thing was called Get Ian On, and I succeeded.
Right, and you had him on early. Yeah,
I succeeded. Right. Best of luck. Hopefully things open back up for you over there as much as possible, and you can kill it at the Cellar and perform in front of your favorite celebrity.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. I'm at the Cellar tonight.